All right. Let's get into the Word. Well, I've been doing again this series on Colossians. I've enjoyed Colossians because it's a small letter, but it has so much content. And I like to do expository preaching as much as I can, because I can get into not only the text but also, the context of it. Why it happened, what was the original audience, and so forth. And so I've been again doing the whole letter to the Colossians. And so we're gonna again read Colossians 3:22 through chapter 4 verse 1. And last time we delved into those 10 verses, and we learned the difference between modern slavery and in the last 500 years, and then also ancient slavery, if you will. And then there's just tremendous contrasts there. We learned also in Colossians 3:22 and 23 that Paul is talking about how healthy relationships should work between employees and employers. And so those principles that Paul gives us are applicable to us today. And lastly, we learned that both employee and employer will give account to God. So your treatment to your employers or your treatment to your employees, we all will give account to God at some point, because in the end, at least from Paul's perspective, God is ultimately our employer, and we work for him. So today we're going to focus rather on the significance of your work. Okay, I want to talk about work. And I know Marvin did something a few weeks ago, if you remember. So I used some of his notes, but I'm going to take another perspective, if you will. According to a 2019 Gallup poll, 65% of workers surveyed back then consider their jobs to be good. Jump to 2023, the Pew Research Center did another survey and found that the percentage of satisfied workers had dropped tremendously. So it dropped to 51%. 51% of workers said in 2023 that their jobs were good. The causes, of course, the causes for the lack of satisfaction is possibly due to the effects of inflation, right? So when everything starts getting more expensive, then you start feeling like you're not earning enough, if you will. But also there's the perception that the economy is improved, but the worker's finances is not. And so there's this disparity, and so it gives us, I think, a cause for, dissatisfaction, if you will. And the saddest thing is that those who don't like their jobs rarely succeed at them. So if you don't like your job, statistically speaking, it's very hard that you will not only enjoy your job, but will be promoted, because a dissatisfied worker normally doesn't make a good supervisor. Normally they don't get promotions because of that. And so in the end, everyone loses, right? I mean, the church loses if you lose your job or you don't get that promotion. The church loses, in your giving, but also your family loses, right? Because there's not enough income per se for your family. And so, a badly paid worker loses, of course. And while Christians are not exempt from feeling dissatisfied in our jobs, we have a greater challenge. Let's read again Colossians 3:22 through chapter 4 verse 1. It's only 10 verses. Colossians 3:22 through 4:1 says, "Bondservants, or workers, if you will, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. For the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done, and there is no partiality. Masters or employers, treat your bondservants or your workers justly and fairly, knowing that you also have a master in heaven. So let's first answer one basic question. Where did the idea of working come from? Who invented work? Whose idea is it? When Paul tells us in Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, he is referring to the idea that work comes from God. Work is a significant part of human life, and there are three reasons, at least three reasons that I find as to why work is significant. Okay, watch this. First, God is a worker. God is a worker. Now, I know a lot has been said about being a workaholic. That's not the topic. That's, I'm sure that some people overdo it, okay? But God is a worker. We know that. In fact, Jesus said that God is a worker. Yes. Look at John 5:17. Look at what he says. But Jesus answered to them, my Father is working until now, and I am working. So, the Father is a worker, and the Son is also a worker, right? Jesus' words are of utmost importance because, these words are happening on a Jewish Sabbath. And they want to kill Jesus because he is working on the Sabbath. What was the work that he was doing? It so happened that he had healed miraculously a paralytic. See? And so the Jewish leaders wanted to kill him because he performed a miracle on the Sabbath. But the implication here is that God is a worker. That's the implication. God, who does not rest even on the day of rest. That's the implication. God doesn't rest on the Sabbath. And the reason is that God never gets tired like we do. In fact, God is so perfect that he doesn't even need, or I should say, he doesn't even have a bed to sleep on because he doesn't need one. Can you imagine that? You could go on and on and on and on and never get tired, right? Well, God is like that. In fact, last night when you went to bed, and you put your head on the pillow and you went asleep, well, at that point, God didn't join you in bed. He stayed there watching over you, awakened the whole time. And when you woke up, right, and you stretched yourself, right, God didn't have to do that because he didn't sleep, and he wasn't even tired when you woke up. He doesn't need to sleep. He's always working. He's always watching over you. And watching over you is a lot of work. Can you say amen to that? Yeah. Watching over us is a lot of work. God is always busy, yeah, right? Not only with our actions, but with our attitudes and our intentions and our thoughts. He's always busy, busy, busy. He has to work. But he loves working too. In fact, he is the only one who has to work on the day of rest, on the Sabbath. See? The Sabbath was made for men and not meant for the Sabbath, meaning that we need the Sabbath. We need rest. We need rest. Yeah. And some of you need it a little more than others. I can see it from here. Sometimes I talk to you and I know you're pooped, you're tired, right? You need a good rest. And one thing I believe in is that just, as we work very hard, we should also learn to rest very hard. So work hard and rest as well. The second thing as to why work is significant, is that man was created in the image of God. See? Now, let's go back to Genesis 2. As you are looking for Genesis 2, here's some stuff that we need to learn. In Genesis 1, we see God creating everything, right? Everything he worked on, he also called good. His creation was work. All that he created is work. And he called it good. God loves to work. He has excellence in his work. When he made you just the way he wanted you to be. Right? It's us that we mess ourselves, not God. His intention has always been perfect and purposeful. So God works, in his creation. He worked on his creation and he called it good. And then we jump over to chapter 2 and we learn, right, that God, God's work has an intrinsic value. See? God loves his work. He loves to work, and everything that he creates, he takes pleasure in his own work. We too are created in his own image, meaning that we too enjoy watching our work. God created people to be his co-workers. We are his co-workers. He works the same way that we work. When you're doing your job, God is next to you doing and helping you to do and finish your tasks. He's a worker, right? Man was created in God's image, and since God is a worker, man also must be a worker, right? God has always been working. And here I think is where a lot of us, wonder, because culture has made a big deal of avoiding to become a workaholic, and they're right to the degree that it can be taken to an extreme, right? And I'm going to talk about it later. But there's nothing wrong about working. In fact, read with me, please, Genesis 2, verse 15. It says, "The Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it." Now watch that. Watch this. Work precedes sin. In other words, work is not the consequence of sin. You don't work because your great-grandfather Adam and your great-grandmother Eve sinned. No. Work is not a consequence of sin. God did not increase man's work. Sin brought the consequence that continues to impact what we do. Not God. God intended for us to be working people because we're made in his image. In other words, because of man's disobedience in caring for the Garden of Eden, he now has to work. Man has now to work among thorns and thistles instead of tilling the fertile soil of Eden. See? It was easier back then than it is now. Look at Genesis 3:19. It says, "But by the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, and for you are dust, and to dust you shall return." Now, here, sweat doesn't refer to, to secreting, that wet stuff that comes out of our pores. Although sometimes it might mean that, but what it means is that, sweating by, in doing your job means that you have to do an additional effort than before sin came, right? To accomplish our work, God has now, not only did he tell Adam and Eve that they were going to have to work hard, but he had to remove them from the place that it was easier to work with. It's kind of like a parent with an 18-year-old child, right? Maybe they don't tell you if you're an adult and you're still living at home, but it's possible that your mom and dad sometimes think, when is he leaving? When will he leave, right? When will he get a job and get become a responsible citizen, if you will? Well, God then, what God does is that he has to expel Adam and Eve from the garden. Look at chapter 3, Genesis 3:23 and 24. Therefore, the Lord God sent him out from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he was taken. He drove out the man. In other words, man didn't want to leave. He drove him out, right? And at the east of the Garden of Eden, he placed the cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. So God not only, we have to assume that God didn't simply say, you go away, you don't have a place here anymore, right? He had to close the door. He had to keep them away. And so that's, in some ways, the consequence of sin. So yeah, sin has made it harder. Our work is harder now than before sin. But work is sacred. Work preceded sin. The other reason why work is significant is because God makes no distinction between secular and sacred work. The idea that God expelled man from Eden means that there is no distinction between my line of work and yours. My work is not more sacred than yours. It's just work. Just as you work among, thistles, thorns and thistles, a pastor also works. That's the same thing. Yeah, thorns and thistles. Mm-hmm. And we must get rid of the idea that work is divided into secular and sacred. Work is work. Any type of work, any good type of work is God's work. Whatever you do, it's God's work. The second question I have is why is it important? Why is it important to work? So let's explore 3 negative reasons why people work. But it's not 3 reasons why people shouldn't work. Though a lot of people use these reasons, but they're wrong. First, some people work for money. That is a misguided reason, because usually such people become greedy in the end. It's just about greed. It's just accumulating. And maybe to some degree it's fear also. They never have enough even when they have everything. I don't know if you read the news, but the U.S. has never had so many millionaires as nowadays. There've never been so many millionaires. And you might say, but how is that done? Well, maybe your parents bought a house 20 years ago. And now that house is almost $1 million in value, at least here in South Cal. That's the case, right? It doesn't matter where you have a property. It doesn't really matter. Anywhere you have a property, it's very valuable in California, because in Southern California, it's dirt. It's the ground, the most expensive thing. It's not so much the houses, although those are expensive, but it's a space, right? Mm-hmm. Another negative reason is that people want to provide for their families, as if that's the only purpose in life, in working. They want to make their lives more comfortable. And this is a valid reason, but secondary, because they end up getting all material things, but in the end it produces deeper dissatisfaction. The more you have, the more dissatisfied you have. I don't know about you, but we tend to enjoy more the things for the first time when we didn't have them. When you ask me, my wife and I have had 2 houses. The first one, of course, we bought it and sold it, and this other second one. But you know what? I always have very romantic ideas about the first house. It was smaller. It was cheaper. But for some reason, I always have that romantic idea about that first house. There is something about the things when you taste something or try something for the first time, your first job, your first house, your first car, your first boyfriend or girlfriend. There's something romantic about those things. Now, they might not be so positive, but what I'm saying is the first time we taste something or try something, it's so romantic, especially later in life, right? But once we satisfy that need and we come to, and we have more than that, then it's not the same feeling. I had a 67 Toyota Corolla. They don't make them anymore. 3 gears. And I used to live here in Hollywood and used to work in La Cañada, Flindridge. And I remember, it's going in third. I mean, that poor car barely made it. But it transported me. And I always have romantic ideas about that ugly car. It was my first car, right? So, if all we want to do is to provide for our families as the end, it produces deeper dissatisfaction because it is based on envy. It's wanting to have what others have and not willing to pay the price that others have paid for what they have. Mm-hmm. The third wrong reason or negative reason is that others' work is to feel they are in control. They do not want to depend on anyone. They want to be independent, self-reliance, if you will. And that there's nothing wrong. I mean, that's a valid reason, but it's a poorly prioritized reason because it is motivated by fear of losing everything. I mean, if I asked everyone here, have you ever feared that you will lose everything? I'm pretty sure that everyone here would say, yeah, I've had that fear at some point or another, especially when you are an adult and you have to pay your own mortgage or your own apartment. And if you're living at home, you don't have the same fear, believe me. But as you age and you get, you become, a working adult and you become sort of independent, then the fear comes, right? Such workers live their last days in loneliness. If they just work, to sort of conquer, to have control over their lives, in their last days, those people tend to die lonely, having everything but nobody around to enjoy it with. It's like one of my fears when someone gets divorced is, man, I'm looking 30 years later. I mean, this person will be lonely. You know why? Because I'm a pastor and I visit a lot of the elderly. And quite frankly, the widow or the divorcee in their golden years, they're not so golden anymore. Loneliness is hard. It's harder to be lonely than to be poor. Some of you don't believe that, right? But it's true. And this is why, work must be done for the Lord. This is precisely why we need to focus. Whenever we go to work, we need to do it for Him. Because in the end, He is the only one who brings satisfaction on and on and on and on. Are you working to satisfy your spouse's desires or your children's desires or your own? Or are you working for God? Who's your motivation? Tomorrow when you wake up, who's motivating you? Maybe it's your bills. I hope not. I hope it's the Lord. And since God is a worker and calls us to be his collaborators, then our work must be done for him. For him, for the Lord. So I hope that tomorrow, when you wake up, you give thanks to God that he has given you another day, and when you get to your job, you can tell the Lord, okay, Lord, let's do it together. I assure you, your day will be a little better, a little easier. You may not have the highest paying job, but if you do it to honor the Lord, he will give you the joy and the satisfaction you need, instead of working only for money or just to provide for your family or to feel in control. I want to end with a third question. And I'm aware, listen, I'm aware that most of our members do manual labor. So I'm going to discriminate in their favors. Please forgive me. I know that some of you teachers or business owners or office workers, I know, and this applies to you, but let me focus it rather on, on manual labor, if you will, in this application. So I'm going to answer this question in the context of manual labor, okay? Beyond the reward God has for us, here's the question. What are the benefits of manual labor? What are some of the benefits? Well, let me give you seven reasons that just I was thinking and praying about. What are some things that I think are true, not just biblically, but secularly, I think are very true. So the first benefit is that it enables you to have a better life. Manual labor helps you in life. Carpenters, gardeners, builders, plumbers, painters, tailors, mechanics, electricians, janitors, and housekeepers all have a better life, a better health than the average worker. Yeah. Manual, those who have a manual a trade, if you will, a manual trade, statistics show that they are less prone to get sick. They're healthier for some reason. The second benefit is that it develops Christian character. The American Academy of Psychiatry is finding out that people who have manual labor jobs have fewer signs of mental illness. The people who end up in the hospital, right? There's a very minute percentage of people who have manual labors. They tend to be healthier, mentally. Self-sufficiency and self-discipline not only increase success; those are secrets for success, but also they develop character. When you are self-disciplined, when you are self-motivated, when you don't have to be told what to do, but you know what to do. When you get to your job and you know precisely what to do, no one has to tell you, because you know precisely what it needs you need to get done. Or you're a team member, you know precisely how to work. One of the joys I've had in doing manual labor is with my brother-in-law. We rarely give. We rarely talk about what we're going to, maybe we say, hey, we're going to do this, right, together. Sometimes I help him. I go to his house or he comes to my house. But we do work together. And you know what's interesting? Is that we get together and we know what to do. We don't order each other around. We just know what to do. Isn't that beautiful? And in the end, everything gets done quite successfully. See? So it develops character, discipline, self-discipline, and self-sufficiency as well, right? There's nothing wrong about a degree of self-reliance. Yes, you can earn your money, and you know that you when you go on vacation and you're at the beach and you're enjoying and you're resting, you know that you've earned it. There's that satisfaction. I hope next time you go on vacation or hit the beach or wherever you go, if you paid for it, then enjoy it. Enjoy it. There's just incredible satisfaction in that. The other benefit, the third benefit, is that it produces measurable satisfaction. For example, a chef's work elevates, their level of appreciation for human beings. Because their job requires empathy for their clients. I mean, you can eat just anywhere. You can eat a hamburger, at the burger joint, right? But if you go to a sit-down restaurant and you order a hamburger, man, that hamburger is different for some reason. That cheesecake, you can go buy a huge cheesecake, whatever, anywhere. Costco sells these fattening big monsters, right? But it's not the same as when you are enjoying the company of someone that you love, and you order, a cheesecake, and it's just a little piece. But that cheesecake comes in a nice dish, and the chef came and put a little bit of chocolate around, and then all the Twitter fans just take pictures and post it, and I'm home hungry, and I'm thinking, man, I'd love to have that cheesecake, right? But what a difference it is, right? When you go to a place where a chef takes time to serve you, and he wants to please not only your stomach but your eyes and the whole experience. What a difference it makes. Same cheesecake, right? But can you imagine the satisfaction that chef feels? When some of you cooks at home or for somebody, and then the people that you feed say your food is delicious. Just an incredible satisfaction you feel, don't you? Maybe you need to learn to cook and serve it and see people enjoy your food, your work. I love to, on weekends, at least once a week, I love to, turn the fire on the grill and throw some meat and vegetables. And when the family, everyone comes home, they find, something freshly done. And I love to see just the joy that it gets to them, right? It's all manual labor. Mm-hmm. So manual labor, whatever we do with our hands, produces measurable satisfaction because we can tell. And we know when we don't do it right. And we know when we do it right. Mm-hmm. Fourth, it helps sleep better. One of the biggest problems of people who can't sleep is that they're not sufficiently tired to go to bed when they go to bed. A lot of people can't sleep because they're not tired enough to sleep, to fall asleep. Those who work under the sun fall asleep as soon as they put their beds, their heads on the pillow because of their elevated levels of vitamin D. A gardener, for instance. Do you know that farmers, and this is statistically true, farmers sleep the most of all professions in the United States? There's something about working under the sun, right? There's something about working with your own hands and doing something with your own body that is productive, that gets you tired, and then at the end of the day, not only are you satisfied, but you're also tired enough that you can sleep instead of turning like a hinge, one side to another and not sleep all night. 5, it improves learning. I have found that every time I get, whenever I do a conference particularly, and I have everyone do something manually, so I have these games, right, before I do my conferencing, if it's conference, and I have them do something manually, and what a difference it makes. They learn quickly. They're like, on top of their game, and they're giving ideas. Sometimes, in this trip in El Salvador, I told my wife, watch, because they gave me 2 participations, and I said, I'm going to use candy the second time around, not the first time, and watch watch the enormous difference, right? So I come up the first time and all the kids are, they're distracted, and I'm, hey, and I was introducing myself, and I'm telling them what we're going to do, and yada, yada, yada. And so I sit down. No connection. The second time I come up, right, I come with all my candy. And I said, okay, so what's the purpose of our meeting together? Because they meet at a park, right, for street kids. So why are we here? No one wanted to answer, but the moment I got that chocolate out, and I said, the one who runs over here will answer my question. All the kids came just for one chocolate. And from then on, I had their attention, right? Just because of an exercise. Of course, the candy was a good motivator, but they had to run over and get it. There's something about, doing something with our bodies that it just increases our level of learning. And in fact, if you have sort of a behind a desk job, they recommend that you do some work to kind of get your blood, pumping, because you get better ideas and you're much more productive. If you do some, physical exercise in the morning. Did I lose my sound? I think I lost battery. All right. Number 6. It reduces obesity and diabetes. Yes, manual labor, again, doctors know this. Have you ever added up how many hours in a day you spend sitting and how many hours you spend moving? I have this watch that tells me precisely when I'm being lazy. Moving is good. It benefits the body. It is uplifting. It is encouraging. Lifting, pushing, bending, walking are exceptional forms of muscle development. And this reduces weight and the risk of diabetes. Yes. One of the things that I do when I'm watching TV is it's not that I'm hyperactive. It's just that I'm self-conscious. So I'm like moving my legs and doing something, and my wife says, "Oh, stay quiet." And I'm like, "Hey, let me stretch a little bit, right?" So it's important, I think, to keep moving, finding something, do something with your hands, even if it's sitting and do a craft or something. There's something not only satisfying but also beneficial physically. And lastly, it improves physiological coordination. Many manual labors require motor skills and coordination. In fact, one of the greatest dangers for seniors is that they lose balance as they get older. Do you know how common broken hips are for the elderly? And that's precisely because they lose muscle. And because they lose muscle, they also lose balance. And they tend to get hurt more frequently. And listen, a broken bone at 80 does not heal as quickly as a broken bone at 8. And so, manual labor is beneficial in every way. And I hope that tomorrow, whether you work behind a desk or your job is done manually, I hope that you can enjoy that. Especially when we think that our work is for God. Whatever you do, Paul says, do it as unto the Lord, not as unto the people who are watching you. Whatever business you do it for you and do it for the Lord. Have that satisfaction that you've done your work well. So that whether it is your client or whatever you do, or your boss, the first person to feel satisfaction should be you. Maybe God first, right? So let me conclude with this. Do you work only for money, or only to provide for your families, or just to feel in control, or do you work for God? who's your boss. You know, you can win an Oscar, a Grammy, a Pulitzer, or a Nobel Prize, but, you know, none of them will give you the satisfaction you need here on earth and in heaven. But for believers, the idea of standing before Jesus in hearing him say, "Well done, good and faithful servant, you have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much," should motivate us beyond money, beyond security, and temporary satisfaction. We should be the happiest bunch of people, knowing, especially workers, knowing that we do it for God.